This week we've got our special guests from HETAS. So we'll be talking about wood burning stoves and insulation today, and Tara will also be giving us a little bit of a background about Exeter Community Energy as well. So welcome to everyone. The agenda is as follows. Can you put onto the next slide, please? Molly, thanks. Okay, so I'll just do a very short introductions. My name is Kay Welfare, and I'm the Partnership Director at Evolve Home Energy Solutions. I'm also on the board at HETAS, so this is combining my two jobs in one go, which is quite exciting for me. We've also got Tara Bowers from Exeter Community Energy, who's going to talk a little bit about what they get up to in the local community. And then we'll have Steve Jennings from Evolve talking about insulation and myth busting about insulation, telling us a little bit about what insulation is needed where and how to install it. And then finally, we've got Mike Harvey with the support of Serena Sumner from HETAS, who'll be talking about wood burning heating systems. As we said, the presentations will be recorded so that we, colleagues and friends can actually see them. And during the talks, please do ask questions, and we'll try and ask questions after each presentation has been run through to the experts. Okay, so now we start. Just a little bit before we start about Evolve. Evolve Home Energy Solutions are involved with energy efficiency and reducing fuel poverty. So we basically believe that no one in the UK should be living in a cold, damp home. And we work with lots of vulnerable people to find solutions based on sort of good workmanship and technical innovation. Our approach is always to put the customer first when we're dealing with customers. I'll hand over to Steve now, who's taking over from us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Yes, well, I'm Steve Jennings. I've been with Evolve now for 5 years. And as Kay said, Evolve run by Gary and Paul, who I've known for a lot longer. And Evolve, we're all about the insulation and heating and working to the latest compliance and making sure that we can help our clients, housing associations, local authorities, all sort of insulate their properties. And we do that with a number of measures, which will come up on the next slide here. So we've got the types of insulation, being cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, external wall insulation, room and roof, and party wall insulation, which is the big picture on the upper right-hand corner. I wanted to talk to you about party wall insulation just for a moment, because well, we have innovation. We basically put through our Lance product, our party wall innovation product, and we're able to identify properties that have a party wall, that have a cavity. So the party wall is the separating wall between two dwellings, often found obviously in semi-detached and mid-terrace properties, be that bungalows or houses. And that party wall sometimes contains a cavity. We can inject 2 points on the front and 2 points on the rear of the property. We can put in the thermoscopic lance and inject cavity wall insulation. And there are a number of benefits by putting this party wall insulation into that wall. Primarily, it's the heating area of the party wall insulation. So you're able to stop the heat from your dwelling, your property, going into a neighbour's property. So the heat that you generate is for your own purpose. It can help if the neighbour's property is vacant for a period of time. As you can imagine, if the wall is empty, there's no insulation inside there, and it's cold next door, it's getting no heating at all, your heat can go into the neighbouring property. So putting insulation inside there can have a big effect and really hold the heat into your own dwelling. And it can also help increase the SAP rating. So for reduced data or RD SAP, EPCs and EPRs, you can actually increase the point score from anywhere from 1 to 5 points per property. We've recently ran a campaign with a local authority near to where we are, and we saw a huge sort of boost in those SAP scores and the savings across that housing stock, and was very successful. And it's an easy win. It's fairly cheap. It's very straightforward to do. And if you've got an EPC that is a D-rated, it's just teetering just below the line to get you into that C-rated EPC, this can be a very quick, very easy gain of a point, or in some cases 5 points. So Party Wall is a really effective way of boosting the RDSAP score. And obviously, at Evolve, there are other benefits of other home insulation here. So, putting whole house insulation around the property for cavity wall insulation and loft insulation will help improve your home's energy efficiency. And obviously that score on the EPCs we mentioned, the occupiers and the homeowners will be keeping the heat within their home and reducing any fuel bills. And obviously with the Party Wall, it can actually decrease the amount of noise that transfers from one dwelling to the next. So in some cases, you'll get people that will have problems with neighbouring properties, children, music, doors shutting. Party Wall insulation can reduce that transference, and as we mentioned there, saving on energy bills further as well. I also wanted to talk about a bit of myth busting around insulation and what happens with insulation and how it can affect the property. There are obviously a few. If you Google or if you look at any reviews for insulation, your mind or your eyes may teeter toward the 1-star reviews or the 3-star reviews, which may not be completely favourable across the industry. So I wanted to myth bust on that. For example, the top one here says cavity wall insulation will cause mould. Well, yes, if that property is insulated without the correct assessments, coordinations, advice, and design, there can be issues. So what we do as part of the new industry standard set out as the publicly available specification 2035, or PAS 2035 as it's better known, is we put in some fail-safes in place. We make sure that instead of a salesman coming to a property and saying, oh, your cavity is clear and it's suitable to be insulated, we will actually have a qualified, accredited professional, an assessor and a surveyor, and they will produce a report based on the condition of the property, on its suitability, and making sure that if cavity wall, party wall, loft insulation, external wall insulation, internal wall insulation is actually, well, basically the fabric of the property is affected by the insulation, that it doesn't have a knock-on effect. We look at the whole property rather than just the one element. So your retrofit assessor will arrive on site, he'll look at the condition of the property and he will look at the cavity or the loft and make sure it's suitable. He'll also look at the background ventilation and the moisture control in the property. If needed, he will advise, or she will advise, whether or not additional ventilation is required. There's a saying now that there is no insulation without ventilation, and that's very much the case. If a property has sufficient ventilation, then we will not need to install additional mechanical ventilation, but if it doesn't, then of course we will. And that again, in part of that journey with the customer, we'll introduce a retrofit coordinator, and the coordinator basically overarches the project, and it isn't just cavity wall insulation. It can be other measures, whether that's the boiler replacement or renewable energy, solar panels, solar PV or solar thermal installed using eco funding. The overarching body will be that retrofit coordinator, and he will provide advice. And sometimes that advice is how to best drive your house. And by that, what we mean is if you've had work done, but don't alter your habits to facilitate the work. So, for example, the cavity walls have been filled, the loft insulation is filled, you've got a brand new boiler, but you're finding that your property is too hot, it's heating up too quickly, or your bills aren't reducing. It's helping people to understand how their habits should change and how to, as we mentioned, drive the house properly. As part of the advice given and get my words out, and the design that is created, we will look at, again, that key word here is ventilation, across all elements. So a part of loft insulation, a part of that design around loft insulation will be to increase airflow into the loft space, or to be add additional ventilation to stop a loft from being full of water, if you like, or having a condensation problem underneath the tiles or on the felt. And then also with Evolve specifically, we don't drill so many holes in cavity walls as may be traditionally known. So when a cavity wall was installed in, say, 1990, there'd be about almost double the amount of holes that we would need to inject now. We use a directional nozzle, which reduces the amount of holes drilled into a property to ensure the fill of the cavity to actually sort of dictate where the insulation is going. So yeah, less holes mean it's less of a mess, and it's easier to make good. And we'll always try to make good, of course, by color matching a mortar or painting over a render as best we possibly can to what's there already. And everything that we do is all installed to the quality that is expected across the industry. We use a number of sort of accreditations across the industry, including the Insulation Assurance Authority, which will ratify the work that we've done. They'll check to make sure before we install the cavity wall insulation or party wall insulation that the work that we put forward is correct and proper to insulate. Our materials are, of course, accredited and are absolutely fine to use as per the ECOE and the BBA. As we mentioned, we are PAS 2030 and PAS 2035. All of our work is guaranteed with SEGA. And we ensure the key element is that there is always ventilation when we install insulation. I think I rabbited on enough, so I'm quite happy to pass on. But if you have any questions, like Kay said, well, you can ask them now, or we can speak later.
Okay, so I can see that there's a couple of questions there for you, Steve. One is, what materials are currently being used in cavity wall insulation?
So we use an EPS bonded bead. So it's a grey carbon bead that is, we manufacture ourselves from Evo bead. It's all absolutely fine to use. It's suitable for all exposure zones. Its U value is down to 0.33 once installed, and it's approved across all of our projects.
Okay, thanks for that question. Just one other question here from Andrew Lockvick, and it's not particularly for us because we don't deal with this, but you might like to give a very brief answer, Steve. What do you use for older solid wall houses?
So we at the moment don't install external wall insulation. So for the older solid wall insulation, we don't do anything just yet. But there are sort of methods to insulate them through the external wall insulation and internal wall insulation. And these are projects that will be coming up in the next phase of ECO. So as we move into ECO phase 4 or LAD delivery, we'll see a lot more EWI and IWI projects coming along, of which we'll be fully a part of.